Mark, and everybody who's out there. I appreciate your presence. And as always, I want to thank Mark. He has been amazing in terms of helping me with Zoom and sponsoring my talks. I'm just so grateful to him. And as he implied, we've been collaborating on an informal series, which we call Pandemic Protection. As we know, there are so many relentless challenges with the pandemic, right? So I've been tailoring my talks so that they could be helpful for you as you deal with the challenges. So for today, our topic is, well, let me say this first. In addition to the relentless challenges of the pandemic, it has brought with it one gift that I can see. There might be more. It's a priceless gift called time. We've never had more time, have we? And sometimes it feels like a double-edged sword. However, what I want to suggest to you is you have time now to focus on the most significant aspect of your life and make your pandemic meaningful by focusing on this and growing it into the way you want it to be. So with that said, what is the single most significant aspect of your life? You may not have thought of it this way, but it's your relationship to you. Whether it's friendly, warm, or mean, or adversarial, everything in your life grows out of the ground of your relationship with you. And for example, it impacts your moods. Hey, if you like yourself, you're probably going to be more cheerful. Your thoughts, your behaviors, your relationships, your love ability, even your choice of a job. As I wrote that, I had a memory from my years in the counseling office of a young man who became a minister. Speaking of choice of jobs, he became a minister because his mom kept saying, "You're no damn good, just like your dad." So he thought, well, then I'll have to be a minister to prove to her I'm guilty. I mean, I'm not guilty, I'm good. So guess what? He had no vocation to be a minister. But you see how that impacted him? So that's why we want to look at this more carefully and flesh this out, so that if your relationship with yourself isn't where you want it to be, and certainly mine wasn't until I was over 30, then it is never too late to change that. Now, interestingly, if you aren't real friendly with yourself, you have a lot of company. In Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, which I often mention because it changed my life, and it's full of wisdom for life 101. Have any of you heard of it? The Road Less Traveled? Yeah. Okay, so Scott Peck is a psychiatrist. And in this book, he says, 19 out of 20 people do not like themselves. And when I read that, I thought, oh, Scotty, come on, that's too negative. I didn't believe it. And then in 1989, I began to teach at Carlow University, my beloved alma mater, the psychology of self-esteem in women. So every semester I had 20 women. I never had a final. At the end, I said, take what you learned here and apply it to your life and write a paper. When I read those papers, I kid you not, I cried a lot. The stories were so sad. Their childhoods had been so difficult. But every semester, one person had had a happy childhood who got enough loving attention. So Scott was right, 19 out of 20. So if you're one of those 19, my hope is you'll hear some things today that will help you embrace yourself. You're a good and valuable person. Okay, so before I get into it, I want to say this. I have packed this hour, and as I was waiting to start, I thought maybe I'm trying to share too much, but this is all of a piece. and I'm hoping it will help you. And I want you to help me this way. If I'm going too fast or if I'm not clear enough, please interrupt me and say, Eileen, I need clarification, or, okay, will you do that? Will you help me? Will you be my collaborator? Okay, I see some people shaking their heads. Thank you. Lori, is that Lori? Thank you, Lori. Okay, so before we start, I'm going to pause, ask you to look within. See, a big part of connecting to yourself is looking within, because that's where your I is, the invisible. I think I forgot to say this. Relating to yourself, I think of it this way. You're relating your I, the inner life, to your me, what you manifest to people, okay? So many people do not like to go inside, but it's so important. So we're going to get a little practice during our hour. So I invite you to go within for 1 minute. I'll be quiet and ask yourself, what's the quality of my relationship with me? Is it friendly or not? Okay, so 1 minute, I'll be quiet. Okay, thank you. I hope you became aware of something. Awareness is the foundation of change. We cannot change what we aren't aware of. So we always want to be noticing that, so we know what we might want to change. Okay, so now we're going to get into the material. And I begin by asking you to remember a picture of yourself as a baby. Usually everyone has one picture of themselves that they like as a baby. Do any of you remember that? I see a few smiles, Patty's smiling. Okay, so why am I asking you to do that? Because when you look at that baby, you know that baby is intrinsically good, don't you? And lovable. That baby was born good and lovable and worthwhile. But the thing is, a baby doesn't know that about themselves. They need that mirrored to them by the adults in their life. If the adults in their life mirror a lot of loving attention, then they grow up like one of my students out of 20, feeling I'm a worthwhile person. I'm lovable. However, most of us do not grow up that way. And it's often because of the household atmosphere. Most parents intend to be loving. I really believe that. And most parents make mistakes. I can attest to that. I was too young when I had my kids. I made a lot of mistakes. I've named them and apologized to them. So I want you to know I'm not judging any parent, but we've got to look at the parents, not to judge, but to see where damage may have been done to our relationship with ourselves so that we can heal it. If we don't know what happened, how do we heal? So, one of the lenses we look through to examine our relationship with ourselves and the roots of it, if we're not happy with it, is through what I call the 4 A's of experiences in childhood. One would be a household where there's addiction. A, addiction. A, argumentativeness, fights all the time. Abusiveness, A, whether it's verbal, emotional, physical, sexual. And the fourth, abandonment. Now, abandonment can mean somebody died and it was never explained to the child, they just disappeared. It could mean, in my case, my father was an alcoholic, so he abandoned us emotionally. He was there, but his primary relationship was with the substance. And so the children missed out on the fathering. So again, we don't name this to judge, but we name it to understand that when stressors like this occur, could be illness too, when stressors like this occur, it damages a child, usually. And children believe their parents are perfect. Remember, the little ones, they're not reasoning yet. They need the parents. The parents are keeping them alive. So kids engage in magical thinking, and they believe the parents are perfect. And so if something is wrong in the atmosphere of the household, they think it's their fault. And they can grow up thinking that unless they bring it to awareness and work on it. I want to give you an example of that from a friend of mine, this magical thinking that a child can do. She was at her uncle's house, and she shared this in talk, so I don't mind telling you her name. You might even know her, LaDonna. She's a wonderful woman. She was at her uncle's house. I think she said she was 4. And she was leaving, and he wanted to kiss her goodnight. And she said, no. And she's entitled to say no, right? But the next day he died. And so in her little girl's magical thinking, what do you think she thought? She caused it. She caused it. Now, if she had an attentive mother who worked with her on that, that would be one thing. But I just use that as an example of how things can happen that hurt children, because those first years, we're like clay and we get molded. And sometimes it's not the truth. The truth would be you are a good and worthwhile person and you're valuable. But when kids experience too much of these stressors, that often doesn't happen. But once again, I want to tell you, it's never too late, never too late to be whom you want to be. Okay, so I want to go from that to, if a child experiences what I did and what many of you I'm sure did with these 4 A's, addiction, abuse, argumentativeness, abandonment, then certain self-sabotaging habits develop. And I'm going to share those with you because I want you to think about, gee, do I do one of those things to myself? Because if you do, it's not friendly, it's not warm, it's not loving. I want you to treat yourself the way you are, a valuable, worthwhile person. And that will require you accepting that, I hope, that you are that person. Okay, I'm going to pause. Anybody? Thoughts, questions, clarification? Are you with me? What I miss about not being in the room at the gallery space that I love is I can't see the nonverbals too much, and I need, which helps me understand if you're with me or if someone has a question or if I need to go over something.
I should have said this earlier, but please remember to unmute yourself, at least for the time that you are asking a question. I always forget that myself. So if you don't, we won't be able to hear you. So in the lower left corner of your screen, you should have a button that says mute, and just click unmute if you want to ask a question. You can also type it into the chat if you want to do it that way.
Thank you, Mark. So if you're not sure whether you need to get friendlier with yourself, then I ask you to consider these common self-sabotaging beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors. The beliefs in the psychology field, we call these core negative beliefs, because a lot of times the person they're semi-conscious or unconscious, because they developed in childhood sometimes, but we really need to surface them well, I'll say more about that later. But a lot of the self-sabotaging beliefs I heard of in the 30 years that I had the privilege of listening to people's stories in my counseling office, courageous people who sat across and wanted to grow. So in those years, and in my own journey, here are some common core negative beliefs that lead to other self-sabotaging behaviors, because we tend to act in accordance with our beliefs. So I'm not okay. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. I'm different. Now, I want to comment on that because I experienced that very vividly. I remember as a grade schooler, when it was recess time, I hated it because all the kids were running around, screaming, jumping, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I stood on the side. Why? So I thought I was weird. I thought something's wrong with me. And what was wrong with me? Because I was living in a home that was so heavy with the alcoholism and the impact on everyone that I had no space for joy. So I share that so that you get, this is real stuff. And then that induced shyness. I was terribly shy until I was 19, and I got really tired of it. And I decided to become not shy. This was even before I had therapy. It took me 10 years of new behavior. If you would have told me I'd be giving you a talk, wouldn't have believed it. I offer that to encourage you that you can become what you want to be. Okay, so other core negative beliefs. If something goes wrong, it's always my fault. Kids really believe that. I'm damaged goods. I'm a mistake. And sometimes parents reinforce these. Like I remember I had a client whose mother said, "You should have died instead of your brother." She had a miscarriage before this woman was born. So these core negative beliefs, I would encourage you to, at some point, look within, or you might know right now, gee, I think I'm doing that. And then it's never too late to make a new choice. Okay, so then let's look. If you have self-sabotaging thoughts, we have 60 to 80,000 a day, and they're powerful to build or destroy. If you have the core negative beliefs, you're probably susceptible to negative self-talk, which would be worry, anxiety, self-rejection thoughts, harsh judging of yourself and your behavior. So that's something we need to think about. If we are insecure, our thoughts may be full of anxiety and worry. And actually, negative self-talk is said to be the #1 killer of personal growth. So if you're not sure where you want to start to become more of who you can be, watch your thoughts. And if you're speaking to yourself negatively, say, hey, no, I deserve to support myself with my thoughts. I'm not going to harbor those thoughts in my precious mind. And then the third category would be self-sabotaging behaviors. Again, this is for a person who did not get enough loving attention in childhood and is feeling insecure for reasons such as mine. So typical self-sabotaging behaviors are, and there'll be more you might want to add to my list, isolation, but of course now we're all kind of isolated, but a tendency to isolate as I did. I thought I was weird. I couldn't do recess. I became shy, so I stayed off to myself. We're intended to fully engage in life. And so there's, for me, a tendency not to. There's a tendency to choose needy partners because like attracts like, or a partner that will take control of your life because you feel insecure. You might become underemployed for fear of failure. there's a vulnerability to escapist behavior if you don't like yourself. You want to escape from yourself. And some of them are seemingly benign, like being busy all the time, working a lot, exercise a lot, but anything that's out of balance in your life, you're using as an escape. You want, and whatever it is that you want to escape needs your loving attention so you can heal it. You can be your own healer with awareness and choice and new behavior. Okay, other self-sabotaging behaviors, given to rage or tears all the time. And that's usually because there's a warehouse of emotions that you never felt safe to express in childhood. There's a tendency to neglect. Now, this isn't for everybody across the board. And there are degrees of this, you know, from being really friendly to not being friendly to being downright adversarial. There's a spectrum. And so it's up to you to figure out, does this apply to me or not? Where was I here? Okay. There's a tendency to neglect self-care in terms of diet, doctors, exercise, grooming. There are trust issues, never trust because the parents weren't trustworthy, or trust too readily because you so much want to be close to someone. And then there's the behavior of hoarding, which we now know is way more common than we ever thought. So how does hoarding fit in here? Well, when a person is insecure and they're not dealing with it, they sometimes use material possessions to bolster their security. So that is my list. Do any of you want to add self-sabotage, any self-sabotaging behaviors to that list? Okay, well, that's enough to think about, isn't it? Okay, now we're going to, I'm going to ask you to pause again and go within, because now I've fleshed out ways in which you could be thinking, believing, and acting that will not create more friendliness to yourself. So I want you to go within again for a minute. And this time you're in search of identifying any of what I call the SS troops, self-sabotaging. The SS symbolism fits because self-sabotaging is destructive. So I'm going to be quiet now for 1 minute. Close your eyes, please, and go within. Okay, thank you. Did anybody fall asleep there? Okay, I'm going to take a sip of my water, and I want to mention that I have learned through the counseling office that there are many people who do not want to go within. I have had to encourage them so much. And when I ask, well, how come you don't want to go within? I vividly remember one woman saying, Eileen, there's nothing there. And that is so sad and so far from the truth. Because everybody was born with an array of resources. As Virginia Satir, a famous family therapist, used to say, everybody's born with a wisdom box. I agree with that. It's part of our divine DNA. You have wisdom inside of you, but you have to go in there and access it. and a lot of other resources. The other reason people that I've worked with don't want to go in is because they know there's a lot of emotional pain. The pain of the past, the pain of the present. And that pain needs to be processed, not run from. I'm going to say more about that in a minute. But if you have a reluctance to go within, I urge you to grapple with that, because you are missing so much, including half of your relationship to you. Remember, I, invisible, am me, what the world sees. So let's show, before I move on to, well, how are we going to heal this relationship with ourselves and make it more positive? Are you sure you have nothing on your mind that you want to say or share or comment? Are you still with me? This is hard material, and I just want to make sure it's clear enough. Is it? Okay, some heads are shaking. An occasional smile. Lori's my smiler.
Eileen.
Right. Yeah, Patty? Yes?
Yeah, so I have a question, because you just mentioned it again. You said I is the individual, me is what the world sees. Did I pick that up correctly, or could you clarify what you're saying there?
Yes, I thank you, Patty. It's the way I think of it, your relationship to you. Usually relationship involves two people, right? So these are two aspects of you. I for the invisible, and also we use the pronoun I. But we're going to talk about that later. I want, and then me. I'm referring to your external self, the way you manifest. I tried to think of an M word, manifest to the world through your behavior. Is that clearer, Patty?
Yes, thank you.
So relating to yourself, you need both components to have a really healthy relationship. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll continue. So in order to heal, to get to a friendlier relationship, a positive, a life-giving, here are some things you need to do. Get in the habit of going within. I'll give you an example of, I was going to give this later. Let me think a minute if I want to give this. No. I think I will. Okay. When you go within, you get in touch with I, what you want. I want, we're going to say more about this. I need. When I was married and before I got into therapy, I never used the pronoun I. Never. I can remember this vividly. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I always quoted my husband, former. Good guy, but we didn't make it. Okay. I would say, Vince says this, or Vince believes that. I never said I. Why? I didn't trust myself. I was afraid I'd make a mistake. I was afraid people would disapprove of me. So I mention this to underline the fact that we must embrace the I. It's good, it's valuable. I didn't believe it back then. Now I do, now I get it. And you can get it too more fully if you'd like. Okay, so we need to heal, we need to go within all the time. And I'm going to say more about that later. So for now, just other aspects of the healing. We have to commit to awareness of the self-sabotaging aspects we just talked about, because it's the only way to end them. So if you got in touch with, you do one of those, and I would say most people do one or more of those, make a decision to stop. You're too valuable to give a roof to something self-sabotaging in your precious self. So we have going within, committing to awareness. Now here's one people resist. list, and I use this in a lot of talks, because last time about depression, emotions, you have to tell your story. You must tell your story to someone, whatever that story is. And the more traumatic it is, the more you need to tell it to a trusted listener, not to anyone that will say they'll fix it or they'll analyze it. You just want a listener who will be compassionate and have empathy for you. So tell the story. That gets the pain out of your body. Feel the feelings. It's often tears, fears, anger. Oh, here's another anecdote from my counseling years. I had a client once who said, Eileen, the strangest thing happens when I watch TV and there's a McDonald's commercial on. I always start crying. So tears reveal a person's deepest truths. So when a client reports tears, I want to know more. We don't want to brush those away. They have a message. So we worked with that, and what we got to was she cried because her family never got in a car and went anywhere together. So she learned that she needed to grieve that. See, part of her story was she had sorrow stored up. So she needed to talk about it. So we never know what'll trigger it. That the tears came before her understanding of what they were about. So honor your emotions and try to learn from them, and don't warehouse them. So then the real healing occurs, and this takes time, is you may have heard the phrase reparenting. Have any of you heard that phrase? I see some shaking of the head. Yes. So reparenting means that you are now going to parent yourself and give yourself enough loving attention that you didn't get in childhood. So this is a process. This takes time, and it's important to be patient. So what is reparenting? Well, the first thing you need is acceptance of yourself, that you're good. Accept that you're good. You're valuable. Some people, unless you accept that, you're going to have a rough road here. And sometimes that takes time. But consider it an assignment that you are, to my mind, you're made in the image and likeness of your creator. So the creator makes good creations. So you are intrinsically good. Now that good may be layered over with anxiety, hurt, things that you've experienced that you haven't processed, but it's there. It's still there. It never goes away. Now, Pope Francis says there's a divine spark in each of us. And whatever our religion is secondary to the fact that we were born with the divine spark. Original blessing. Reclaim it. Let it shine. Okay, so the reparenting. Affirm yourself. Evict the self-sabotaging little demons, whether they're belief, thoughts, or behaviors. Take good care of your body, your mind, your emotions, your spirit. Your true self, the one that's valuable, resides deep within. Invite it out. Invite it out. Give it permission to shine. Okay, let's see. So a deep connection to your inner self develops a strong sense of yourself. So the more connected you are, the stronger you're going to be. So now we're going to move to, so now that you're healing, you're going to take better care of yourself. We're going to look at how do you get to know yourself now? But again, before I begin this new section, any comments, thoughts, questions? Everything clear? You're getting all this? Okay, I see heads shaking. I like that.
Eileen,
Yes, Patty, my faithful question asker, and I appreciate it. Okay, go ahead, Patty.
when you went over the steps how to heal, you listed
Yes.
several. Would you just mind giving a quick recap? I'm taking some notes and I don't want to miss.
Sure, Patty. We usually need to hear things more than once anyway, so I'm glad you asked. Okay, so in terms of beginning to heal and get friendlier with yourself,
Mhm,
make it a habit to go within
mhm.
and to your, and I'm going to give you some things to look for when you're in there in a minute, but get in the habit every day. Become an inner directed person. See, a lot of people, like when I was growing up, I was an outer directed person. I was always scanning the environment. What do they want of me? Are they going to hurt me? Are they going to laugh at me? That's no way to live. That's based on fear and anxiety. We want to become inner directed. We're in charge of our lives. Guess what? The only thing we can be in charge of is ourselves. So let's do it. Let's do it, especially during the pandemic. If you live alone, as I do, and you do not really like yourself, the pandemic's going to be torturous for you. So my hope is that you will go on this journey of discovery, and that will ease the pandemic challenges. And I had this fantasy that when the pandemic's over, some of you might look back and say, oh, the pandemic. That's when I finally learned to be friendly with myself and to embrace myself. So, okay, you wanted me to go over the healing steps, Patty. Now, there are more. I just chose these as being important. The habit of going within and checking on your wisdom box in particular, because that gives you guidance for the journey. Commit to awareness of any SS troops you have and commit to evict them. Choose to stop. I will no longer do that. I will no longer escape through whatever it is, too much television, too much shopping. I will get balance in my life. Be sure that you tell the story to a trusted person. Friendship is so important. We really need a friend to listen, and we need to be a friend who will listen. And then the reparenting process, which can last for a lifetime, but whatever it takes. Once you start taking care of yourself, there's a chain reaction of positivity. So I think that was it, Patty.
Okay.
You understand reparenting, right? All the aspects of yourself you now give enough loving attention to
Yes. Thank
that you
you.
missed out in childhood. Okay, so now we're going to move to, well, okay, how do I get to know myself and what do I want to know about myself? So this is I remember when I started this journey, I love to read, but I began to almost unconsciously always choose memoirs of women. And looking back on it, I realized I was trying to figure out how will I want to live? And reading all those stories was helpful. That's just an aside though. Okay, so getting to know yourself, getting the relationship of the I to the me in a very friendly, warm, embracing state. That's what you deserve. So go within and ask yourself, for example, you can't do this all at once. What do I want? What do I want? And if I were you, I'd keep a journal about this voyage within and write down, what do I want? And that seems basic. What do I want? But it isn't for everybody. I remember vividly a client who told me the story that she lived in a very poor family and there were like 5 kids, I think. And one day she innocently said to her mom, Mom, I want to take piano lessons. I want to take piano. And her mother screamed and yelled and said, how dare you want that when I can hardly put food on the table? So you see how that shut her down from going within and how she never allowed herself to want anything again. And that's what brought her into therapy. She had to learn that. So we don't want to take anything for granted. You're entitled to all of these. If you're stuck with some of them, ask yourself, how come? So what do I want? What are my gifts? Let's affirm ourselves. Let's find out. What do I like about myself? What don't I like about myself? Do I belong to me or others? Do I look to others for approval? Or as I've said earlier, am I other oriented? Am I at peace with who I am? Do I need to look at that, tweak something so I can be peaceful? What do I value? What's important to me? These are all big, aren't they? To give thought to and to get in touch with. Do I have a life purpose? Now, I would urge you to do some of this other work before you get there. Because when you learn these other things about yourself, you'll be able to create a life purpose. So that's a bit premature. But what do I regret? We all have regrets. But the idea is regret it, learn from it, and let go. Don't beat yourself up with it. Have I forgiven myself for mistakes? Which is basically what I just implied. Do I hold on to grudges and resentments, which hurt you, mind, body, and spirit? We talked about that in our forgiveness talk. So those are some of the things that I encourage you to discover by going within. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to go within one more time. This is an hour in which you're getting practice. And I hope you'll be able to make it a habit because you practiced it here. And you find out it doesn't really hurt, does it? You can do this. Okay, now I'm going to be quiet again for a minute. This time, I want you to look within and see what you notice that is interesting about yourself that maybe you weren't aware of before. Just look within for some new awareness of you. Okay. I'm back. Does anybody want to share what they got in touch with? Okay. I will move on. Actually, I'm kind of winding down now. And it's time to consider any questions you have or comments. But for now, I want to say, unless you interrupt me, which I hope you do, I want to encourage you because this can seem overwhelming. So take your baby steps. Don't beat yourself up for what you haven't attended to. Be compassionate with yourself. You know, a lot of us are great at giving compassion to others, but we deserve compassion too, right? I'm really getting a kick out of your smiles, Lori. Thank you. I can. So when it feels too heavy, shift the focus, take a break. Like if you're doing this work, it can start feeling heavy. I want you to do it if you need to in a balanced way to tune up your relationship with yourself. It impacts all areas of your life. Okay, so take a break though if it gets heavy. Shift to gratitude thoughts. They're so easy to find, gratitude. And, it's funny, I keep mentioning Lori's smile, but it reminds me of Mother Teresa's words about smiling, which I love. She said, smile at 5 people today, whether you feel like it or not, because peace begins with a smile. And smiling is one of the easiest things to do, isn't it? Now I see Charlene smiling. Hi, Charlene. Yeah, I can't see all your faces. Wait, I see Lisa smiling, and I don't have a name for the woman above you. But anyway, I like to see your smiles. Thank you. And so shift the focus. Shift the focus, refresh yourself. Take a walk in nature. Nature is so replenishing to the spirit. And reach out to friendship. We've said in all the talks, one of the keys to moving through the pandemic safely, taking care of yourself, is stay connected. Stay connected. Whatever that means for you, stay connected through mail, through phones, through this Zoom, through an occasional visit, maybe if it's safe, but stay connected. And I was thinking about this. If you get in touch with something today that's pretty heavy, and it isn't an easy time, say, to get into therapy, but if it's heavy and you don't have the right friend to talk to, consider maybe someone from your church, or I think there are lots of hotlines now, crisis hotlines, teletherapy. Does anybody know any of those? Well, if so, Mark, do you have anything on the website like that? Crisis hotlines or?
Yes, we do.
Oh, good.
Recently posted something, and let me put the link to that in the chat. Hold on. Go on. It'll take me a minute to find.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
So
I'm glad you asked that.
you
because we
could
just
reach
got
out to, pardon, Mark?
I'm glad you asked because I hadn't thought of that, and we just recently posted something. So
Oh, good.
yeah,
Great.
a whole
So
page.
look for resources, right? Don't be alone with this. Connect. Okay, let me see what else I wanted to say. I wanted to just give a brief summary of what we covered in this hour, because a lot of it were important concepts. But just to summarize, you were born intrinsically good. If you do not believe that, it's because you did not get enough loving attention as a child, and you learned things about yourself that weren't true, like you're not okay, or you're different, or you don't belong. So we looked at, then we have to unlearn those untruths. Whatever's learned can be unlearned. So part of this journey will be to see, what did I learn that's hurting me? And it isn't true. It's not grounded in reality. And then learn to value yourself by knowing yourself. We can't love what we don't know. And so many people live and die without knowing themselves. Like my mother, 68, when she started to go within, and she had 17 glorious years after that, where I wouldn't have known her if she wasn't able to shift the gears like that. Okay, so embrace yourself, hug yourself. It's never too late. When you become friendlier with yourself, trust me, I've lived this journey, the world becomes kinder and gentler. You'll be amazed, because you're viewing it through a different lens, and you will find a kinder and gentler world. So I already shared with you my hope that you'll look back on the pandemic someday and say, oh, that's the time I finally had time to embrace myself and to begin loving myself. And those benefits will live way beyond the pandemic for the rest of your life, when you became more fully alive and engaged and connected to life. So I want to mention our next talk, but before I do, I want to see if there are any last minute comments, questions, needs for clarification.
So Eileen,
Yes,
I have a
Patty?
question.
Yes.
So, and it's about reading material. You referenced earlier in your talk that one of the ways that you, and this is when you said you identified more with what your husband's thoughts and needs were than your own.
Yes.
And so
Before I woke up. Yes.
and you said that you read a lot of women's memoirs.
Yes.
And found that to be really helpful. And I'm always interested in, reading women's memoirs just to, especially, from a historical perspective, how women have advanced over the ages. And do you have any specific books that come to mind that you would find particularly helpful?
Wow. That's a great question, Patty. I did that decades ago.
Okay.
So I have one that stayed with me because I'm also a writer. So Virginia Woolf, the writer, wrote a beautiful memoir called Moments of Being. You might want to try that. It isn't about writing, it's just about life. I'm afraid that's the only one I remember right now.
That's
I'm sure the library could help with that. Couldn't it, Mark? Could it? Are you there? Mark is.
I know that Michelle
Yes.
Obama wrote Becoming,
Yes.
which it was just very good. And I know I've seen it
Yes.
even on our shelves recently. Yes.
Oh,
Oh.
Alice, that's a great idea. Did you hear that, Patty?
I did.
Boy, yeah, what a role model she would be. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you, Alice.
You're
Great.
welcome.
Thank
There
you.
are lots. There are
And then-
lots, Patty. You'll find them.
And then my other question has to do with reading as well. And, in terms of, the task set before us today, getting to know ourselves better.
Yes.
Are there any books that come to mind along these lines where, reparenting, going within, and, if you don't have titles now, that's okay, but just maybe something, maybe I can just research that on my own too.
Well, I do have a tip along those lines. When I was waking up, I discovered Nathaniel Branden, who has written 3 books about self-esteem, which is really what we're talking about here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Loving yourself in the best sense of the word. So you might look up Nathaniel Branden's 3 books, Patty.
Okay.
I think they would be very helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else?
On a humorous note, Joan London recently came out with a book called I forgot why I came into the room, or it's something like that, and it talks about getting older.
Yeah.
But makes it's very funny, but it really makes you realize that everyone else goes through this.
Yes, we're not
You
alone.
know what I mean? Like it's not as bad as we think. And we keep thinking, oh, if I keep forgetting that, then there's something wrong with me. What is this the beginning of? And she just puts it in a way that yes, that is a normal process. And I think it was I really enjoyed that book also.
Well, thank you. You sound like a real reader, Alice.
Being at the library every day.
Oh, do you work there?
Yes.
Are you on the staff?
Yes.
Oh.
I'm a contractor for the library. I do their public relations.
Oh, wow.
But like on our website, you can go scroll. There's a section just of it says new books. So you can click on it and go by category, fiction, nonfiction, other lines, and it'll come up the latest one. It'll have pages of it. So sometimes I'll look through it because I may not realize, to go on the shelf and look, or be aware that something's just come out. But this way, if it's in a particular genre that I'm looking for, it's easy to pick out things and enjoy things that you would not necessarily know were there.
Wonderful. Thanks for the tip.
You're welcome.
The Virginia Woolf memoir you mentioned, Moments of Being,
Yes.
is available through the library. So
good.
you can call the library and we can request that for you.
Oh, great. That's quick action there. That's Mark.
I posted the title, and I posted the publication information in the chat if anyone's interested.
Great,
Okay.
thanks, Mark. Well, I want to tell you what I had. Oh, yes, Lisa.
Yeah, this was excellent. This
Oh,
is so
thank
good.
you.
I've told people about it. Unfortunately, one of my good friends couldn't come, and because something came up that she had to take care of. Is there any way that this is being recorded that she could listen to this later?
Yes,
That's where
I
we
will
need
be
Mark.
recording it. I'm recording it, and I will post a link. I'll be glad to send you the link later.
Okay. What about the first one? The first one?
Um,
or-
The earlier ones I also have, although I have to re-edit those because they were posted, but we ran out of space. So I had to download them, and now I have to re-edit and repost them on YouTube. So eventually I will get those up on YouTube
Okay.
as well. This one, I should have a link to send you in hopefully this week.
No hurry. Thank you. That's
Email
wonderful.
me and remind me if
Lisa, I am so grateful that you spoke,
Oh,
because when you do something like this, you're really not sure how it's
right.
and so for you to name that was a gift to me.
Oh, this
So
is
thank you.
wonderful. I really
Thank you.
appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the way Mark, I couldn't do it without Mark. I consider him my partner. He doesn't even know that, but so the next.
I want to echo Lisa's thoughts too, because I feel the same way. I've become, I think, one of your fans, Eileen, with these talks. I wasn't
thank you,
aware
Patty.
when Mark introduced you of all the talks that you've done over the years at the library. And I just know I've been able to participate in the last couple, and I think they're wonderful. It's a great way for self-enrichment.
Thank you, Patty. Well, what we have in mind for the next talk is January 22nd. It's a Friday at 2:30, and it would be like a sequel to this talk. And my working title would be Strengthening Your Sense of Self. In effect, strengthening your self-esteem. So you're just discovering the self now and beginning to embrace it. And then the next talk would take that another step. Does that make sense? Is that of interest? It seems like a
Absolutely.
logical place to go from here.
Yes.
Okay, well, I hope to see you there. And before we say goodbye, I want to wish every one of you a peaceful, safe, and meaningful holiday season,
Mhm.
whatever that means for you. And I want you to make meaning of the pandemic. Is what's his name? Brooks, David Brooks, New York Times columnist, says, meaning is a vital medication for the soul. And certainly we need medication, don't we? And so make meaning out of the gift of time. Okay. Well, thank you for being with me. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eileen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for coming.